Well, thank you for coming again. Part two of the continuing saga, the post-Christian future. Again, just like the first one, if you've not watched the first one, I would recommend that. You don't have to have watched the first one for this one, but this is sort of a continuation, a little bit, of the thought experiment. But I'm going to show you a few things in this one that are a little more concrete, and I would say definitely contemporary in terms of ideas that are currently in circulation that we need to be aware of and we will ultimately need to think about. So the subtitle here is Pop Culture as High Priest of the Post-Christian Religious Worldview. So what I'm going to focus on is talking about the post-Christian culture, the post-Christian condition, and then sort of zero in on how, in the post-Christian world, what you're going to see as far as the morphing of Christianity. And I'm not saying that the morphing is going to be good. In fact, I'm suggesting that the morphing is not a good thing. And it's really going to morph into something that's actually very old. And we'll talk about that at that point. So this is going to be sort of, hey, here's what I think it's going to look like. And it's not really just opinion, because I'm going to show you what people are saying right now. Okay, that futurists, scholars in religious studies, scholars in pop culture, that sort of thing. And we will comment on it as we go. So, by way of a sampling, what are the kinds of things futurists are talking about? Specifically, I'll start with this excerpt from something called the Center for Future Consciousness. The two people behind this website and this organization are the Lombardanos, and they have sort of a statement of purpose, statement of principles for explaining what it is they do. And these are just a few of the comments. You'll notice that they're really oriented to this idea of gaining a holistic understanding of the present capacities and potential future evolution of consciousness and the human mind. Again, so there's what I want to plant in your minds right now is this whole idea of the human progression, human upward evolving, so to speak, and this theme of consciousness. Okay, these are just going to be data points that we're going to return to. They're also interested in the future possibilities in science and technology that we're going to encounter, and of course their impact on humanity in terms of this, upward evolution, and again an evolutionary perspective on reality in the future. So this center, the Lombardanos, again, are quite well known as far as being futurists that would be invited to conferences and write books and all this sort of stuff. And so this is what they're thinking about. Now, typically, and this is from one of the Lombardanos' PowerPoint presentations, they're typically thinking of the future as some sort of techno-utopia where transhumanism is a big part of it. Technology obviously goes without saying, but again, they're sort of vision casting, not just in terms of gadgetry, okay, but specifically in terms of a set of ideas that they feel are going to both dovetail with and derive from advancements in the sciences in particular. And as the sciences go, religion is going to sort of be dragged along or morphed or transformed with it. And so there's a whole set of ideas there. And this is where I want to sort of orient for the rest of the time. Techno-utopian values, again, the usual suspects here. Progress, purposeful evolution, human power over nature, material or technological advancement as the key to success in the future world, all this sort of stuff. Freedom, of course, really translates to don't give me any rules or any dogma so I can be free. Happiness and hedonism, right in their presentation. The singularity is something we'll talk about momentarily, but I want to zero in on this document, a Cosmist Manifesto. Okay, right here, this one here. And here are the 10 points. I've abbreviated the annotations for the Cosmos Manifesto. But here are the 10 principles, 10 points. Humans will merge with technology to a rapidly increasing extent. It's a new phase of the evolution of our species. Now, you might be thinking cyborg here, okay, which is one way to think about it. But if you know anything about nanotechnology, that's an invisible integration. That's something you never see. But it has the potential. Once you have control over every atom in your body, I mean, every molecule, you can change the human species as we know it. And this is going to be, and is now. I mean, you can buy whole books on the ethics of nanotechnology. I mean, I've read a couple of them this year again to get my head into the sequel to the novel. And they're talking about things like elimination of disease, optimizing the human DNA for its various potentials. And they're really ultimately talking about immortality, because you're dying cell by cell. And every cell is made of molecules and that sort of thing. Well, if you can control and release nanobots into the body, so to speak, that instantly repair cellular loss, you have potential immortality, other than somebody shooting you in the head or something like that. I mean, you get the idea. You will not age. You will not decline as a physical specimen. So this is how it's going to be cast, but this is the sort of merging they're talking about too. It's not just what we would sort of think of as a cyborg. Humans will develop sentient artificial intelligence and mind uploading technology. Now, this derives from, and I don't want to get too far into this, but the current mind-body, what even theologians and futurists and neuroscientists call the mind-body problem. That is, are you your brain, or are you and your brain separate? Well, if you are your brain, then we can tap into the right places where the brain stores what you think you are, again, your internal thoughts, your memories, that sort of thing. And if that can be uploaded, when we think, into another body, but what if it's uploaded into a machine? You don't actually have a body anymore. I mean, this is the kind of things that we're not talking, this is in science fiction, but you'll actually read academic literature discussing this. It's not science fiction in that sense. Humans will spread to the stars and roam the universe, again, to meet and merge with other species out there. Won't that be wonderful? Humans will develop interoperable synthetic realities, again, virtual worlds able to support sentience, again, self-awareness. Some uploads will choose to live in virtual worlds. Maybe I want to continue my life in this virtual world over here rather than this one. That's what they're talking about. Of course, then, the question of what is real becomes sort of blurred. Humans will develop space-time engineering and scientific future magic beyond our current understanding and imagination. Translation, technology that does stuff we can't really even conceive of right now. Space-time engineering and future magic will permit achieving by scientific means most of the promises of religions. Oh, that's interesting. Many amazing things that no human religion ever dreamed. Eventually we'll be able to resurrect the dead by copying them to the future, or of course to some virtual reality, of which we can be a part. Wouldn't it be nice to sort of, keep living with your loved ones, with what they are in terms of their, brain synapses firing in a virtual world forever? As long as somebody doesn't pull the plug, that's kind of a problem. You kind of need the electricity there. But intelligent life will become the main factor in the evolution of the cosmos, steering it toward an intended path. Technological advances will reduce material scarcity drastically. Of course, everyone will have all that they need, of course. We talked about that the last time with utopianism. New ethical systems will emerge, well, I guess so, based on principles including the spread of joy, growth, and freedom through the universe. And 10, all these changes will fundamentally improve the subjective and social experience of humans and our creations and successors. Again, this is the points of the Cosmist Manifesto. Now, let's say that a lot of that stuff just sort of takes off and becomes reality. A lot of it, in fact, I would be willing to say all of it is in some form on the table now and either being planned or in some cases the initial starting points for it are already implemented. In other words, we're on these paths already. And again, I'm not talking about science fiction writers. I'm not talking about wacky Christians that just, are sort of, conspiracy minded and all. I'm talking about people who don't really give a rip about religion or anything like this, that are working in these fields, and this is the future they see. This is the future they envision. This is the future they're working toward. They're IBMers, okay? The commercials and all that stuff. This is why they got the job and went to graduate school, because they want to do this stuff for whatever set of reasons. So what happens if this trajectory keeps running? What happens to Christianity? Well, again, what I'm going to show you here is how I think Christianity will begin to ape or adapt itself to this future. And again, I'm not saying this is a good thing. We all know already, this isn't news to anybody, that church as we know it is already this self-adapting thing to the trends of the world. Okay, we already know that. So what might we see more of and might see develop? Well, I think God will become spoken of as an eternal divinity. Well, that's kind of nice. God's eternal, isn't he? Sure. God is and always was. He is eternal consciousness. And in some respect, we would say that now. But again, moving Christianity, either keeping it the way it is in terms of the biblical text, biblical Christianity, retaining that or destroying it is a matter of controlling the vocabulary. It is not difficult. If you control the vocabulary, you win the day. All right? All it takes is the implementation of mass media, which what I really mean by that is repeating it often enough to enough people, that thinking shifts. It's not difficult. This is as simple as you can make it. It's just a logistic issue. Okay? So God is and always was. He's eternal consciousness. We have monism instead of dualistic theism. Monism, again, is the idea that everything is one, all is one. Dualism, which biblical theology requires, is a firm separation between creator and creation. So material reality, material matter at the quantum level, convinces us that materialism is an illusion. Now, you have physicists already saying this because of the way they apply quantum physics. Well, think about that. If matter is an illusion, and I realize your minds are already probing the inconsistencies of that statement. Just hang with me. If matter is an illusion, well, then isn't everything God anyway? If God is the only uncreated thing, the only thing that's not matter, and if matter is an illusion, then why don't we affirm monism? Doesn't it make sense? Doesn't monism make sense? It's still God. God's still eternal. Why is that a problem? Again, you control the vocabulary. Quantum physics, again, this whole idea. This is from Paul Davies, who's, of course, a well-known physicist. He talks about quantum theory here. The old assumption that the microscopic world of atoms was simply a scaled-down version of the everyday world had to be abandoned. Newton's deterministic machine was replaced by a shadowy and paradoxical conjunction of waves and particles governed by the laws of chance rather than the rigid rules of causality. This is physics today, and it's the reality of physics today. Now, for biblical theologians, the question becomes a simple one. Well, maybe this does reflect God in some way. Maybe God made it this way and we just didn't understand it. Okay, that's different than redefining God, okay, by virtue of what you're looking at. So, again, when you go down to the smallest level, and we realize even in this is made of atoms, and atoms are jumping around all over the place, and quantum theory says none of that behavior is predictable, so that this thing we call matter is just completely chaotic, completely random. It creates illusions of real things for us. If this is what we're talking about, then matter's an illusion anyway. So isn't everything God then? Isn't it all divine? So we have this eternal divinity idea. We'd also have an eternal humanity element to our Christian theology in the post-Christian context. You could say things like our soul and our mind and our body is a totality, and that's the Hebrew view, don't you know? Eternal consciousness can't be located. It doesn't have, it's not limited spatially. It's everything, and it's everywhere. Again, this is quantum physics applied to the human body, the human mind, the human soul. We are all part of the same undefined, unlimited thing that we would call God. We're all one. Transpersonal psychology is part of this. And for those of you not familiar with that term, this discipline studies the transpersonal or self-transcendent or spiritual aspects of the human experience, basically trying to psychologize spiritual experience, spiritual belief, that kind of thing. Transpersonal experiences may be defined as experiences in which the sense of identity or self extends beyond, that's the trans part, extends beyond the individual or personal to encompass wider aspects of humankind, life, psyche, or cosmos. Again, trying to take all of our religious experience, all of our religious ideas, all our thought life, and reducing that, psychologizing that, which means you link it to something in the brain which has evolved, okay? And since matter is immaterial anyway and is sort of an illusion, we're just a reflection of everything else that is, which is God. Okay. It's a nice theology so far. So we have God as real, okay, like that, but he's eternal consciousness now. All of creation is a reflection of God, consistent with modern science and the material world, and experiences that transcend material reality are just as real since consciousness is real. So therefore, prayer and premonition and prophecy, visions, providence, even transubstantiation, that idea from Catholicism, heaven, even hell, because those things are just stored in your memory banks. They're a result of things you've heard and how your brain processes things. Reincarnation, ghosts, deja vu, all of it is real. All of it is affirmed. It's as real as this podium right here. But again, this podium is an illusion because we know that from quantum theory. And we're all just part of everything, and everything is part of us. We're all God, and God is all of us. I don't know about you, but I'm getting a warm fuzzy right now. Hey, this'll preach.
There you go.
This will preach. Yeah, I know it sounds funny, but it's true. What does it cost you? Well, you lose the creator-creation distinction. That flies out the window. Yeah, God is very real, but he is not personal. He's not a personal entity. He's a thing. He's everything, and everything is him. And there's no individual entity that exists outside of creation anymore. And what's the distinction between God and man? Well, not much, really. Other trajectories, divinized humanity. Now, we've already touched on this. And again, I'm not denying that the future world will still not embrace biological determinism and Darwinism, that sort of thinking. That's part of it. But what I am talking about are things like human enhancement and transhumanism. We tend to think, oh, this is sort of ugly. Sure, humans have lots of flaws, but I kind of like being human. What's wrong with that? It has advantages too. Well, if we go down these roads, we could argue that, hey, enhancing our species and transhumanism is the meaningful goal of our evolution. In fact, it's not only a meaningful path, but we're really, when we do this, we're acting like our conception of God. Isn't God intelligent and creative? And you realize I'm talking about God as though he were a person and then denying it in the other breath, because that's what you're going to hear. Okay? Again, you control the vocabulary. Genetic engineering that's a good thing. Genetic selection. Hey, you weed out the bad, you enhance the good. That's nanotechnology, nanomedicine. I mean, if we find out ways to sort of become immortal and and we like this life, that's fine. If we don't, well, we'll just inject ourselves into some virtual world, and we all get to live forever anyway. But it'd be nice to be conscious of the fact that I'm living forever. I know I'm an eternal being anyway, because matter's an illusion and all this stuff. But I'd kind of like to know it, experience it. So if I can't experience it in this world, I'll experience it in some other world. So yeah, I'm in favor of para-humanism, chimeras, because we're just making ourselves better. This is the natural goal. This is what we ought to do because we want to progress, don't we? We don't want to just stay what we are. That's not progressing, is it? It's staying and progressing. I mean, it's easy to understand which word means what. Neural implants, mind uploading, all this artificial intelligence. The singularity is sort of this thing that futurists angle for, which is defined simply here as the theoretical emergence of greater than human superintelligence. Now, once that happens, the future becomes unpredictable, because since we're humans now, we can't really imagine what that would look like. Maybe when we evolve to that point, then we'll kind of get a grip on it. But right now, we really can't. So this is what, again, this is what is looked forward to optimistically. Okay, that we want this to happen. So, what does the new man look like? Well, we image God. I mean, we are God, but we image God. Well, what does that mean? Well, we already know that we're God, but when we seek to progress and advance and do great things and empower ourselves and become one with nature and all this stuff, we're kind of behaving like God would if he were really a personal God. So we image him. We're doing the things that a God would do. And so that's consistent, isn't it? That's consistent theology. We're fulfilling the dominion mandate. Hey, that old Bible thing talks about, that God, putting us on earth and saying, subdue the creation and have command of it and all that sort of stuff, and find out what makes it tick. Legitimizing this scientific enterprise. Those are good things that Christians should do. Resurrection is not needed, because consciousness is eternal anyway. But hey, if you want to keep experiencing the world as you know it, we can pull off resurrection here with nanomedicine and all that sort of stuff. You'll continue to be immortal. And if you die, if you die in the right circumstances, we can probably bring you back or upload your brain somewhere else, and you'll be okay. So we're becoming what the God of the Bible, myth that he is, in terms of personhood. We're becoming what God intended. We're actually fulfilling our own eschatology. We're in command of our future. We're eradicating disease. Wouldn't the Bible approve of that? Come on. We're transcending racial and gender divisions, just like heaven. That whole thing about it, when in heaven you're neither married or given in marriage. None of this racial stuff matters. None of this gender stuff matters. Why can't we have that now? It's rebuilding Eden in our own image. To satisfy ourselves is what we're really getting at. So what's the theological cost? Well, we become divine apart from God's plan of glorification. It redefines salvation only in terms of the end, okay, glorification, rather than it dismisses the means, which is the cross, and the whole reason for it, which is sin. But hey, doesn't the Bible talk about humans being glorified and being in the presence of God? Well, I kind of think that the New Testament's talking about, our new techno-utopia here. I know the Bible makes it sound like God's a person, but we've now discovered through science that, again, matter is an illusion, and we're all part of the same stuff that makes up the universe. And so, how much more divine can you get? How much more beyond human can you get? So, why should we worry about what this primitive book says? I mean, at the base of it, it was correct. Okay? The supernatural is real, because there's really no such division as natural and supernatural and all this stuff. I mean, I'm manipulating the vocabulary all over the place here, because I only have an hour to do it. If I have 50 years to do it, I can take it one piece at a time. It's not a difficult thing, especially if you have churches filled with people who aren't looking for any of it, and frankly are biblically illiterate. I mean, let's just be honest. They're not thinking about this, and I don't want to say church shouldn't be about fellowship and about broken people getting fixed and stuff like that. That people do have real needs. I get that. And frankly, I'd rather that kind of healing occur in church than anywhere else. But that is not all it is. And I think we've sort of drifted into what we get from pulpits on a weekly basis is psychology. We get felt needs stuff, rather than anything that smacks of content. There's a low toleration for thinking in church, which is really going to put us in trouble at some point. I think it already has. But what about Jesus? Well, the divine, Christ is divine, of course. He was probably a human being that just understood all this stuff before we did. He was so far ahead of us. It took us to the 21st century to figure this stuff out, but Jesus was already there. He was either a human who fully grasped all this wisdom and taught it for posterity and was in fact willing to die for it, for the truth of all this. Again, what is that? Well, knowing that we would never cease to be separate from God, that we're all one. We're one with God. And the Jews didn't like that, so they killed him. But Jesus is a great example for us then. Or he might be a manifestation of eternal consciousness. I mean, maybe eternal consciousness, those little quantum particles, that sort of, like some of them became us, maybe some of them became Jesus and just brought all that advanced knowledge with him, all that sort of thing. Or, and when it gets right down to it, Jesus may have died on the cross, but he still lives. He's eternal. Okay? We're eternal too. Doesn't the Bible say that? Doesn't the Bible describe human beings as eternal souls, really? We just get these bodies for a temporary stay here on earth, but we are really eternal souls. Don't you guys know your Bible? The new Christology, Jesus lives and always did live. See, the eternality of Christ. We can affirm that. Jesus is our eternal brother. We're united to him. Salvation in this embodied life is being released from the fear of death. That was Jesus' message. Believe in what I'm telling you, and you'll have eternal life. Knowing that death is nothing and we will be with God forever, Jesus was the divine messenger to humanity of these truths. That will preach. Okay, it's already preaching. Well, what do we lose? Well, we don't get Trinitarianism anymore because we can't really talk about persons when we're talking about God, so that's kind of a weird peripheral thing. The traditional gospel, the meaning of the cross, Christians of a century ago just sort of misunderstood that, but we get it now because we know more about the eternality of ourselves and our world and the universe, frankly. And salvation, of course, this definition would sort of deny our nature, and it elevates our co-divinity with the Father and Jesus. That might make Christians of 100 years ago uncomfortable, but we know what that means now. We're just all one. We're just all eternal. So in summary, post-Christian Christianity actually has an old name that's been around for a long time. And that name is Gnosticism. Tried and true. Now, I debated on including this, and I'm looking at my time, and you know what? I think I can, so let's go for it. We'll try to be speedy here. This will be a really quick overview of what Gnosticism is if you don't know what it is. I drew this from a series I did on the Da Vinci Code. Someone out there may have seen. So what is Gnosticism? The basics. Well, the Gnostics believe that there is something they refer to as the true God, or the light, or pneuma, which is spirit. And isn't God a spirit? I mean, doesn't John 4 say that? Okay? God is a spirit. He's pre-existent. This God is pre-existent, uncaused, and perfect. Sounds pretty biblical so far. Gnostics imagined the true God of being both male, the Father, and also female. And the reason they thought this was because everything else that exists is produced by this God. So in the Gnostic, this is the early couple centuries of AD, and they don't really necessarily know where babies come from and all that kind of stuff. So they're imagining if this one true God produced everything, there must be something male in there and there must be something female, and then they produce offspring. So that's how they wrote about it, to communicate the idea. Now this true God, or the light, exists up here in its own realm. And then, so there's this sort of barrier that they sort of conceived of. There's the residence of the true God. And then down here is the created material world, which is really a far distance away from the true God. This is us down here, material stuff. And in the middle, there was this middle world or spiritual world. And that was populated by other gods, other divine beings. In Gnosticism, they are referred to as aeons. And so the true God essentially took bits and pieces of himself, or this divinity thing that pre-existed everything. Out of that comes different entities. And you notice I have them male and female here. And these are the spiritual beings, the other gods, that the true God creates to do whatever he needs them to do. And again, below them is the created universe. They're beyond the universe here. This is down here, the world we know. So these are the true God's essence in different forms. Together they are referred to in Gnosticism as the pleroma, the fullness. Collectively, all of these beings are the full essence of the true God. Now, in terms of cosmology, the highest eon is called in Gnosticism the Logos. Is that a familiar term? Okay, this is the highest son of the true God, the Logos. The first eon, the first emanation, the first act of the Father. He is the entire likeness and image of the true God. Again, these are Gnostic statements, okay? He's the form of the formless, the body of the bodiless, the face of the invisible, the word of the unutterable. All these things. And he actually possesses the knowledge of all the eons. He is unquestionably superior. He's the top dog, the top eon. Now, the Logos, right here, again, is the top. And together, the Logos with the true God, the Father and Mother element in the true God, form the triad. Well, let's just call it a trinity and be done with it. No, it's not the same as a trinity. If you know your Trinitarianism, this is not the same. But they're using the three language. Now, as the Gnostic story goes, one of the eons, in fact, the one closest to our world, the lowest eon, but still an eon, was a female eon, and her name was Sophia. She decides, I love the true God so much, I want to be like him. And he did all this creation stuff like he created us. So I want to create too. But I know that he doesn't really want me to. But man, I just can't resist the impulse to be like him and create. So in Gnostic cosmology, she does that. She rebels and decides to create her own thing, her own entity, just to sort of try it out and be like the true God. Now, the result of that, Sophia, I don't know why she's not appearing up here, but she's not. The result of that, if you look at what Gnostic texts say, the Sophia wanted to bring forth a likeness out of herself without the consent of the spirit, the pneuma, the true God, or any consort. She didn't have any other help from any of the other male eons. And so a thing came out of her that was imperfect and different from her appearance. Why did she do it? Well, the Gnostics, of course, view this as a transgression, so they have nasty things to say about Sophia. That she was lewd and the great cosmic whore and all this kind of stuff. What she makes is referred to in Gnosticism as the demiurge, which either fundamentally it means the maker. Okay, we'll get to why. He's also called Yaldabaoth, which is the child who comes forth, also called Saklos, the fool, also called Samael, the blind one, also known as Yahweh, the God of Israel, the God of the Bible. Why is he blind to a Gnostic? Why is he a fool? Because he's arrogant enough to deny that there are any gods beside him. He ignores the eons. He ignores his superiors. He's blind. He's willfully blind, and he's a fool. Now, the demiurge is sort of a deity unleashed to the Gnostic. Here's our little barrier to our world. As the God of the Bible, the demiurge is the creator of our heaven and earth. And the demiurge says, I created this heaven and earth thing. I think I'm going to create something else. I think I'm going to create archons, rulers, to help me administer my own affairs in this heaven and earth, this universe. Archon, of course, is a biblical term. It's used in the New Testament for the principalities and powers and all that stuff. And he also says, you know what? On earth, I think I'm going to get together with the archons and we're going to create and enslave humans. Does this sound like Zecharia Sitchin, anyone? He's a Gnostic. Okay, that's all it is. Maybe he never knew he was a Gnostic, but he was. Now, Sophia, which you can't see here for some reason, was horrified at this in Gnostic cosmology. She's like, boy, did I make a mistake. And now these poor humans, they're just going to be slaves. What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? I can't really tell everybody what what do I do? What do I do? Well, what she decides to do is she decides to inject some of her divinity into the man, into humanity. So he's not just a lifeless, brainless, soulless critter. He's more than that. He is. And so, as he procreates with Eve, so is every human really inside divine. Now, what the problem is for Gnosticism is the human beings have to discover that. That's salvation in Gnosticism. Salvation in Gnosticism is knowing Knowing what? Knowing this, that you're really divine. What your material world is a world created. The reason there's evil is because its creator is evil. He has built evil into the world, and you're trapped in it. Your only hope is to transcend this life by knowing, by learning and knowing that you are divine. You are in some way attached to the eons and attached to the true God. Does this sound familiar? Okay. And this, this is Gnosticism. This comes from ancient, texts. This is nothing new. It's centuries, millennia old. So if you look at our previous trajectories, we have an eternal divinity. Well, that there, what we're really talking about is the true God. All this evil that you experience, the true God has nothing to do with that. He's good. And we're talking about eternal humanity. Obviously, we are eternal beings. We are divine. And the Logos, man, he's important. He is the top dog. Now, the rest of the story in Gnosticism, who's the hero? The hero is the serpent. Because it's the serpent who comes to Eve and says, hey, I got a question. Did God really, and by God he's referring to the maker of heaven and earth, the demiurge. Did God really say that if you ate of this tree you were going to die? And she says, yeah, we eat it, even if we touch it, we're going to die. Now that part she's making up. But he says, you're not going to die. If you eat of the tree, your eyes will be opened. You will become as gods. You'll become as Elohim in the Hebrew text. So the Gnostic views the serpent as the hero. He is trying to inform humans of their own divinity, of their own connection back to the true God. And the demiurge punishes him. So it is a severe inversion of the Genesis story at that point. But it'll preach. I view Gnosticism as the one ring. The one ring that unites and binds all of it, everything. You will find East and West thinkers articulating the very same thoughts. If you're familiar at all with Eastern religion, what I've just been going through is like, yep, bing, 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 point for point, okay? It's just cast in a cosmological story that's different. All the elements are the same. It unites East and West. It unites all religions. Now, not necessarily all adherents, because there are Gnostic Christians, and then there are those of us who aren't Gnostics. But yet, within the umbrella thing we call Christianity, there were a lot of Gnostics. And there are a lot of Gnostics today who will take the term Christian. There are Muslims who are Gnostic, Muslim mystics. You can just read the mystical literature across the board in any religion. You're going to see all of this, okay, all of it. Evolution goes very well with it because we're progressing. We need to awaken to the fact that we're divine and then realize, like, wow, we live in a world where we really can understand that all of matter, all of reality, and this thing that we imagine as God, it's all one and the same. It's monism. Everything is united. All these experiences that people have or that I've had, they're real because of this thing we call consciousness. Our bodies are just a filter, like a radio filters sound waves. Our bodies filter consciousness. That's why we have deja vu. That's why we have this experience, that experience, visions and prophets and all this stuff. It all works. It's all real. You get to keep it all. You get to affirm it all. So I think it's comprehensive. It's being validated by science. And what I mean by that is a lot of science writers are saying things that if you're a Gnostic, oh, you love it. Now, there are a lot of, science isn't directed toward proving Gnosticism. What I'm saying is a little bit different. That Gnostics have plenty to choose from in the hard sciences to say, we're right. Now, a particle physicist might look at them and say, you're nuts. Okay? The physicists I know would, who are believers, who are dualistic and Christian. But the Gnostic doesn't care about that. Because you know what? You know what the Gnostic knows that a lot of Christians don't know? That their numbers are increasing and your numbers are decreasing. You are becoming marginalized. Our view is becoming popularized. Okay, we'll get into pop culture here. But again, the academy's there, and of course, pop culture. Science, I'm going to run through this real quickly. This is a book, if you're into this, if you're into the physics, theoretical physics stuff, I would recommend reading this. It might infuriate you, but James Gardner is a lawyer by training, but he's published in peer-review journals. He's into cosmology. And his first book was called Biocosm, and he advocates, now Ray Kurzweil, this is Kurzweil's opinion of the book, which is positive. Kurzweil is the guy who wrote the book The Singularity. We had a quote there from him. Gardner's selfish biocosm hypothesis proposes that the remarkable anthropic or life-friendly qualities that our universe exhibits can be explained as incidental consequences of a cosmic replication cycle in which a cosmologically extended biosphere provides a means for the cosmos to produce one or more baby universes. Now that's a little dense, so let me try to unpack that for you. In his Q&A, Gardner's Q&A on his website, we have this. Question, what are the religious implications of the biocosm hypothesis? The hypothesis is inconsistent with traditional monotheistic notions of an unknowable supernatural creator. Well, that's honest. Right? There's a discernible and comprehensible evolutionary ladder by means of which mortal minds will one day ascend into the intellectual stratosphere that will be the domain of the superminds. Question, is biocosm just a religious screed in disguise like intelligent design? No, biocosm is adamantly and consistently naturalistic in focus. Now, from Amazon, here's, I think, a better idea of what Gardner's saying. Gardner proposes a startling theory that a pre-existing super-intelligent race that inhabited a mother universe, some other universe, created ours and tweaked the physical laws of our universe, of the baby universe they made, to ensure the continuity of intelligent life and itself. So all that design stuff that you creationists out there think is the hand of God, it's not. It's the hand of someone else. And all that evidence for the Big Bang, that the universe had a beginning, well, it did, but it was birthed by another universe. In other words, it creates the visual impression of a beginning. But there was something before it, and before that, and before that. It's eternal. It's an endless regress. And this is peer-reviewed. This is in physics journals. Okay, this is not like my website where I'm trying to pretend I'm a physicist. Okay? I'm not. Now, Gardner's second book, The Intelligent Universe, Artificial Intelligence, E.T., and the Emerging Mind of the Cosmos. In The Intelligent Universe, James Gardner envisions a third dramatic alternative, a final state of the cosmos in which a highly evolved form or group of intelligent engineers, has anyone seen Prometheus? Okay, engineers, a cosmic renewal, birth of a new universe, blah, 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 blah. Okay, I'm going to skip the other stuff about Gardner. He quotes Gardner commenting on Orgel and Crick and life itself. If you're familiar with Crick, one of the co-discoverers of DNA, he believed in directed, intelligent panspermia, that life on this planet, including DNA, was seeded by aliens. Now, Gardner critiques that a little bit. Basically, he's saying, I'm a little bit smarter than Crick here. But Crick was one of those biology idiots. We're physicists here. Now, what about religion scholars? This is Jeffrey Kripal. He is a professor at Rice University, PhD, University of Chicago, and an author that I think you should become acquainted with. This is his book, The Serpent's Gift, Gnostic Reflections on the Study of Religion. Okay, Kripal is a Gnostic. I'd run into him every year at the American Academy of Religion. Okay, that's what he does. This is from a review. This, again, is a peer-reviewed review of Kripal's book. And just look at what it is. Knowledge is the serpent's gift. Knowledge of good and evil, moral and ethical knowledge. We have not been expelled from the garden by the aforementioned petty and jealous God. We would have gone on to taste the tree of eternal life. Again, we forsook knowledge and turned to faith, like they're mutually exclusive. Okay, again, this reviewer is reviewing what Kripal says, and very positively. Though most of us would agree that modernity has had its heyday and the postmodernists make some very good points, we have yet to name a successor that can constructively direct us as a body of discourse forward into new forms of knowledge and understanding. And this is where Kripal steps in and reminds us of gnosis, not just a bunch of dried out scrolls buried under a layer of pigeon doo-doo, but a viable, promising, indeed perfectly appropriate methodology that can take what is best from modernity and the Enlightenment and leave what no longer works and carry reason and the critical method forward, transformed into what is, for better or worse, a postmodern era. He's saying, look, we've had modernism, postmodernism, and the next thing that needs to happen is we as academics need to commit ourselves to Gnosticism. Okay, this is a religion scholar who teaches at Rice University. Now, I'm going to speed ahead here. Let's see here. Because of pop culture. Now, the way Gnosticism is conveyed to us is typically through stories about extraterrestrials and superheroes. Okay? Because extraterrestrials, they can be the gods of old, they can be the archons. And again, you'll find this too. The discussion of, hey, are there similarities between the archons and this ET stuff and blah, blah, blah. And superheroes, of course, who are part human but part non-human. They're evolving, they're mutants, they're progressing, or they're divine and they just look human. Again, so this is how the ideas are committed through science fiction and comic books and all this stuff. Now the result is really two. You get either a quasi-Gnosticism, where archons are, these extraterrestrials, using the extraterrestrial idea. And that's where Ancient Aliens are at, that whole idea and the whole series. That aliens put us here, and that's what Prometheus, again, the film, was all about. Supposedly a prequel to Alien. Now, if you watch the movie, you wouldn't get Jesus in the movie. But if you look up the original script online by Ridley Scott, the reason why the engineers in Prometheus wanted to destroy their creation, that would be us, is because they visited us 2,000 years ago and we put them on a cross. That's right in the script. Now, there's a detailed review that I didn't write, but somebody else wrote on, and the guy might be a Gnostic, I'm not sure what he is, but he goes through Prometheus really closely. And it's really remarkable at how many biblical elements are mixed with classical mythology, the Promethean material, in that original script. If you want that, email me and I'll send you the link, okay? Because we don't have time to go through it here. Now, what I want to focus on here, this is Prometheus, just a couple things. One of the writers to Prometheus was a guy named Damon Lindelof. Here are some of his recent credits: Cowboys and Aliens, Prometheus. The new Star Trek film coming out, he was a co-writer. And something that might appear in 2013 or 14 called 1952. 1952 is something you want to keep your eye on, because this is from the blog, what's it called? It's about UFOs in film, cinematic flying saucers or something like that. And I can send you the link too. Disclosure through Disney in 2013. Disney's aborted 1950s UFO acclamation movie, is it headed for the big screen? So this entry is about the fact that this writer, Lindelof, was allowed into Disney's archives, specifically into something that no one else has gotten to see because, well, unless they're still alive that were alive in the 1950s, and that is this. In 1979, a guy named Ward Kimball, who was an Oscar-winning Disney animator, was at a MUFON symposium, MUFON, Mutual UFO Network, and he told the story that NASA, or the Air Force, excuse me, approached Disney in the 1950s to request cooperation on a documentary about UFOs that would help acclimate the public to an extraterrestrial reality. According to Kimball, in exchange for that cooperation, the Air Force offered to furnish the production with genuine UFO footage. Walt Disney agreed and actually started on the project, but it was tabled when the Air Force reneged on the film. It has literally sat in a file drawer since being handed to Lindelof. And so the supposition is that 1952, okay, the year that it was canned, is what the film is about. It's about this project. Now you can go on YouTube. Disney did create a different UFO film that promoted the idea that UFOs and aliens were real. They never actually released it for public consumption. It got aired, I'm not sure where it aired, but it only aired once and it never actually made it to consumer TV. But somebody has posted it on YouTube in 3 parts. You can find it. Again, I can give you the links if you email me. Last point. There's a whole scholarly book. This is University of Chicago Press. This is a dense read. It's a scholarly book called Mutants and Mystics, Science Fiction, Superhero Comics, and the Paranormal. And guess who wrote it? Our friend Jeffrey Kripal. He has an entire chapter. If you're into UFOs, this will be shocking to you. His entire last chapter is on Whitley Strieber and communion. The whole purpose of the book is to show how comic books, and specifically the alien theme, has been a useful and wonderful and delightful vehicle for transmitting the truths of Gnosticism. I mean, they're not secretive about this. It's just, here it is, So again, I highly recommend that you read this. Again, he argues that much of the recent popular culture of the US comes from what used to be called the paranormal. He has a third book called Authors of the Impossible, where he as an academic says academicians, scholars, ought to own up to the fact that paranormal stuff is real. I mean, he's arguing in favor of paranormal stuff within the account. He obviously has tenure, because we're not at the point yet where we'd have whole departments of this, in every university. But he is a committed academic and a committed Gnostic. And he is extraordinarily well-read in comic books, pop culture, media, movies. If for no other reason than a reference book, you ought to have that. I mean, it's just really good stuff. So Kripal identifies a super story, a modern living mythology, and beliefs concerning alien contact and humankind's place in the cosmic scheme of things. Again, showing how science fiction, and fantasy owes less to science than it does to earlier occult systems. He even goes into Madame Blavatsky. None of this is new. Okay, the whole alien thing is just rehashed Gnosticism / occultism / theosophy / whatever, fill in the blank, for a technological society. That's all it is. And it's, this is what's going to reach the masses. If you go up to the Internet Movie Database and put in the keywords alien and 2012, for the last year, there are almost 4,000 episodes, either episodes of TV shows or movies, just for last year. That doesn't count YouTube. Okay, that's the stuff that the IMDb tracks, that's released, that you have to pay for. That is not YouTube. You know, and don't do too much of that or you'll start to get like me. I mean, it's just depressing on one level how exhaustive an effort this is. And it's going to change the way a lot of the church does church and does Christianity, because you got two choices. You either you either stand in opposition to the world, or you join, you adapt. And what I'm telling you, this whole presentation comes down to this. The adaptation is going to be led by people who know what they're doing and will control the vocabulary and teach others. They will teach others to mime the vocabulary and morph the theology. And it's only going to take a generation before that becomes the articulation of what Christianity is. And why can't you get on board? Why are you so, antiquarian or just odd? Okay. So again, all of these last two sessions have really been things that have been floating around in my head because of the sequel to The Facade. So again, I'm sure you're getting tired of hearing this, but if you haven't read The Facade, you ought to. If you have, go up to the website, join the mailing list so that you can stay up to date with alerts about the sequel. And of course, the website, you can contact me and follow me on Twitter there too. So that is the end. We can wrap up. And if you want to do questions, we can try to do that, or if you got something to go to, feel free.